Now we have our next areas, roles of budgets in budgeting process and standard costing. We discussed strategic management in detail. Once we define the direction where we want to take our business, then we make some long-term plans, and they're broken down to some short-term plans and short-term budgets. So let us first define what a budget is. This is how you define a budget. Budget or a profit plan is a realistic plan for the future expressed in quantitative terms. These are the three key terms in this definition. First of all, the plan has to be realistic. You can't build castles in the air. Whatever you want to achieve in the future, it has to be realistic, and it must be expressed in numbers, quantitative terms, right? So that's how you define a budget. Is a realistic plan for the future, and that is expressed in numbers. When you say numbers, those numbers could be dollar-based numbers called the financial, or non-financial, like quantity, number of units to be produced in the next quarter. So that's how you define a budget. What budgets do for us? How do they serve the organization? First of all, budget is a planning tool. If you are able to achieve your short-term budgets, that means you will be able to achieve your long-term plans and budgets, and eventually you will be able to achieve your mission statement. What is mission statement? We discussed in our previous class. Mission statement is the reason why does a business exist. So you will have a meaning of your existence. You will have a justification of your existence if you are able to achieve your short-term and long-term plans. So budget is a planning tool. It's a control tool also. Let's say if I want to get up to this point and I'm right here, how close I am to my ultimate objective? Am I doing in the right? So not only you can reveal your progress toward the goal through budgeting, you can also control your action, whether you're in the right trajectory, whatever we planned, have we been able to achieve the short-term plans, medium-term plans, and eventually our long-term plans and mission statement. So it's a control tool. It's a tool that reveals your progress. To what extent have we been able to succeed? It is also a tool for personal self-evaluation. If you are the sales manager and you were given this sales target, $10 million for the coming quarter, if I achieve this target, I can self-evaluate myself. How well did I do? If I achieve this goal of this sales target, I can draw comfort from the fact that I have achieved the target set for me by the management. So it's a tool that you can use to self-evaluate yourself. Then, budgets are not prepared in isolation. Budgeting process is not done in a closed box. It has to be integrated in the accounting system because information will come from accounting system, past sales records, and it has to be integrated within the organizational structure. Budgets are not prepared in isolation. Sales budget cannot be achieved unless you draw up a production budget. Production budget cannot be achieved unless you have the raw material purchase budget. Raw material purchase budget cannot be attained unless you have the money to purchase material. So every production, sales, marketing, human resource, finance, they're all linked, all connected. So budget is something that has to be integrated in the organizational structure. Then, yes, it's a motivational tool also. If you achieve your goal, whether you are in production or sales or finance, if you are able to achieve your goal, that will motivate you. That will also help you self-evaluate your performance. How well did you do? Next, some important terms regarding budgeting. Budget must be seen realistic by employees. If you give them a tough target to achieve, a hard target, they will be demotivated. Give them a target that will motivate them, that is attainable. Unrealistically stiff targets will only backfire. So that's an important point. That is one of the key terms in the definition of budget. The budgets have to be realistic. Then, there must be a degree of flexibility. Yes, budgets must be flexible. Because let's say you plan to produce and sell 10,000 units in the coming quarter, but there was a sudden economic downturn. The whole business community was in trouble. So when there is an economic downturn, how do you expect to sell 10,000 units? So you may have to revise your budget downwards to, let's say, 7,000 units, right? So the budgets must have an element of flexibility, so we can incorporate the changing circumstances into the numbers. So that's an important term. Budget must be flexible enough to accommodate the changes that are taking place in the environment in which we are operating our business. Then, budget is a means of communication. What senior management wants, what is the goal, what is the mission statement, this is communicated through budget. So basically, this is how you tell your employees what we are attempting to accomplish. If you want to be the leading seller of your product in the industry, through budgets you tell your employees what are we trying to accomplish. So budget is a good communication tool that will let your employees know about the management's expectation. Yes, we just agreed to a definition that says budget is a realistic plan. Let me take you back to the first slide here. Realistic plan for the future, of course, expressed in quantitative terms, in numbers, whether dollar-based or non-dollar based. So budgets are basically formal quantifications, whether dollar-based or non-dollar-based, of management plan. Plan is put into action and certain numbers are given for sales, for production, for material, for finance, and these are the goals in numbers that you need to achieve. So basically what budget is all about, it can be nicely expressed in this statement. See, this is a very fantastic statement. It covers what the budget is all about. We know what the budget is. It's a specific plan for the future expressed in quantitative terms. Budget lays out specific terms of organization's expectations about the consumption of resources and resulting outcome. What we are going to spend and what is going to be the outcome. Let's take the example of marketing budget. If we are planning to spend $10 million on marketing, sales and marketing, right? These are the resources that will be consumed. What do you expect as a result of this spending? Spend $1 million on material acquisition. What would be the outcome? It will result in some completed units. Similar, so on and so forth in different dimensions of the organization. So budget basically shows you the expectations about consumption of resources, what you will consume, and the result, what you will give in return. Consumption, outcome. That is the essence of budgeting. Because we have limited resources. Everyone, every company, every individual on the face of this planet is facing what you call the basic economic problem. Our resources are limited. Our wants are unlimited. So we have to use those limited resources in a way so as to achieve our desired results. We can't do everything. We can do some things out of the money available. So it all starts from the mission statement, which we know to be the reason why does a business exist. What is the rationale behind the existence of the business? This is encapsulated in a statement, a brief statement, not a detailed one, not a very specific one, a statement that defines what we are. This statement then results into is translated into a strategic plan. A long-term objective is drawn up that will help us achieve the goals set out in the mission statement. As I said, resources are limited. Every firm, every individual is facing this problem of limited resources and unlimited wants. So we have to prioritize what is important for us, how we can allocate limited resources in the most productive way. Limited resources need to be efficiently and effectively allocated so that we can achieve our organization goals. Since the mission statement defines why does a business exist, what we want to achieve in the long run, small achievements, what you call the operational budgets, will result in achievement of our tactical goals. These achievement of tactical goals means you will be able to achieve your long-term goals set out in the strategic plan. So short-term objectives, which we will be achieving on quarterly basis or a monthly basis, they directly flow from these priorities that we decide when we translate the long-term plan to the business. So these are the key terms you must be familiar with, that these are the foundations of your entire budgeting process. As discussed earlier, budget reveals your progress towards success. To what extent have we been able to achieve our goals, short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals? Like we plan to achieve a sales target of 100 million in the next year. So it would be split up into 4 quarters, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 and quarter 4. And then you can see on quarterly results compared with the budget on annual basis. To what extent are we able to achieve our annual sales target? So it evaluates your progress towards the goal. You can compare your actual numbers achieved in each quarter with the expected numbers for each quarter. So that's what we call comparing actual results to the budget on quarterly basis, on monthly basis. One important point you must not overlook: when drawing up the budgets, you cannot ignore external factors. COVID-19 destroyed many economies around the world, at least shaken them to the core. So effects of external factors cannot be ignored. Externalities must be brought in. That is the reason we need to make our budget that are flexible, that can accommodate changes. So general economic conditions, whether they are in your favor or they are going against you, it must be incorporated into the numbers. The industry in which you are operating, if the industry is booming, sales are rising for all your competitors, then fine, having an ambitious budget makes sense. But when there is an overall economic downturn, the industry in which you are operating, if the industry is facing a tough time, how do you expect you're going to achieve your ambitious goals? So it's all that you must consider: general economic conditions, external factors, social factors, interest rate, tax rate, business confidence, supply of labor, supply of money, of course, interest rate, so on and so forth. So they must be incorporated into budgeting. Now some important points here. Let's say you want to set up a budget for 2022, right? And you are just instructed on 15th of December 2021 to prepare your budgets within 2 weeks. 15th December up to 31st of December 2021. And you are required to prepare budget for the entire 2022. Now that is ridiculous. Just 15 days. How do you think you can manage this budgeting process in just 15 days? So you must be given sufficient lead time. Sufficient lead time means you must be given, lead time basically is the time lag between starting an activity and ending it. So the time it takes from starting and ending an activity is called the lead time. So you must be given sufficient lead time to start and complete the budgeting activity. Right? So sufficient lead time must be provided. I believe at least a month, a couple of months before the close of the year, so that you can consider all the dependencies, all the external factors, economic factors, industry situation, your own resources. So you should be given sufficient lead time for the adoption of, for the setting of the budgets. Next term, budget planning calendar. This has nothing to do with the calendar we use Jan to December. Budget planning calendar, basically it includes schedule of activities for the development of the budget, development and adoption of the budget. When we will start what, at what date sales department will give its input, at what date the production department will provide the numbers and marketing and so on and so forth. So basically budget planning calendar is a schedule of activities and key dates that on which date which department will provide what information. So these are basically the founding blocks using which we will construct our entire budget for the coming year or the coming quarter. So sufficient lead time must be provided. Budget planning calendar is made that includes details of activities and when the budget will be adopted, key dates at which information would be provided. Then the next key term is the budget manual. Just like we have accounting manual that contains the details how to operate an accounting system in the organization, HR manual. Similarly, we have, whenever we purchase an electrical item, we get a manual that tells us how to operate it. So budget manual is something similar. Budget manual basically are the detailed procedures that includes the distribution instructions that are important for the setting up of budget. I'll explain all these. Do not confuse these two. Budget planning calendars contain the key dates when specific information would be made provided. This is revised every year, every period, every quarter. Planning calendar is revised every year, every quarter. But budget manual tends to be fixed, more or less static. It contains procedures, instructions that are important for preparation of your master budget. We'll discuss master budget in our subsequent classes. It is also called annual profit plan, where or a combination of all the budgets, financial budget and operating budget. So budget manual contains the procedures that we will adopt in drawing up the budget, and planning calendar shows the key dates, the list of dates when the information would be made available for the purpose of setting a budget. Next important term is, if you set up your budget, but the sales management and the production management, they have their reservations, budget will fail. There must be buy-in at all levels. Those who are involved to achieve the budget targets, they must agree to it. They must accept the budget. Otherwise, the budget system will be ineffective and it will fail. So, buy-in at all levels is essential for effective budgetary control system. Means production, sales, marketing, finance, HR, all those that are involved in the setting up of budgets and achieving the target, they must buy it. They must accept it. Otherwise, the whole process of budgeting will fail. I told you a little while ago, budgeting is not something that a single department does in isolation. It's a coordinated effort. Sales, marketing, production, purchasing department, finance, logistics, they all work together. Budgeting is a process that facilitates communications among different organizational units. They have to work together. So basically it enhances coordination so that different departments, they work together for the common cause, for the common organizational objective. This is what you call in a simple term goal congruence. Like this is the goal that the organization wants to achieve. And all the organizational units, all the departments, they focus their efforts in the same goal. That's what you call goal congruence. So budgeting is a good tool that will bring different departments together, that will encourage coordination and communication, facilitate communication between different departments. Of course, your sales cannot sell unless production produces it. Production cannot produce unless the purchasing department procures the material. Purchasing cannot procure unless the finance makes the money available to them. Even everything is available, money, people, material, the sales team, but we do not have logistics to deliver the goods to our customers. All activity will fail. So there has to be a coordination between different organizational units. Sales, marketing, procurement, logistics, finance, human resources, information technology, and so on and so forth. Coordination is extremely important, otherwise your whole activity will fail. Right? Next, we have a few more concepts. The concept of controllability. Now the question is why, when we draw budgets, we just discussed a little while ago, budget helps us control, budget helps us plan, budget helps us assess our progress towards the goal. When you say concept of controllability, you can't control everything using budgeting. Something is in your control. Like for example, we want to evaluate the performance of our sales manager. Right? We can only make him responsible for the things that he can control. He can control sales, he can influence the level of sales, but production is not in his control. Right? Finance is not in his control. Purchasing of the material needed for production is not in his control. Make him responsible for those items, those areas that he can exercise control. Otherwise, you're making him responsible for material acquisition or for finance, that the budgeting system will fail. Controllability must be very clearly laid out what a particular manager can control and accordingly make him responsible for it. That's a very important concept in budgeting. Controllability. Controllable costs or revenues are those that are under the discretion of a particular manager, and that particular manager can then be made responsible for that element of cost or revenue in case of sales manager, right? Where controllability is not clearly laid down, or there is a mismatch between controllability and responsibility, your budgeting system will fail. If I am responsible for $100,000, then I must also be able to control this $100,000. You can't make me responsible for $150,000 or $30,000, right? There must be a correspondence between controllability and responsibility. You are responsible for what you can control. The things that are not in your control, you have no responsibility for them as well. So as I said, that budgets could be long-term, could be mid-term, could be operational, quarterly. So this is what it is laid down. Strategic plans or strategic budgets, they are the concern of the senior managers. They can extend up to 13 years or more even. Intermediate plans or the budgets, this is the concern of the middle managers, and they have time frame up to 2 years. And when you say the operational plans, as the name suggests, operational plans or the operational budgets, they could be for a day, a week, a month, a quarter, or a year. So you can see strategic plans are the concern of senior managers, intermediate plans are for the middle level management, and operational plans are for the lower level managers, supervisors responsible for specific job in their department. And their time frame is 1 month to 1 year. I will not go for these exact time frames. What the idea you should keep in mind, that strategic plan is for the long term without specifying years, because time dimensions are changing rapidly as the technology is advancing, as the economy is becoming more vibrant. So I won't go for these specificities. Just go for strategic plan is for the long term, intermediate plan is for the midterm, and operational plan is on day-to-day basis. That is more appropriate rather than giving the exact specific months or years. I won't go for that. Just keep the essence of these classification in mind rather than going for the strict periods. Next we have participation in the budgeting process. There are two extremes in budgeting. In one extreme, the top level management simply draws up the budget and throws it down to the subordinate. This is called the top-down approach, or what you call the top-down is the normal word, normally authoritative budgeting or imposed budgeting. The budget is prepared by the senior management and simply dumped or imposed upon the subordinate. It has its benefits, its limitations also. The opposite extreme is what you call the bottom-up or participative budgeting. Both have their own advantages and disadvantages. Top-down approach and bottom-up approach. We'll discuss these in detail. So it could either be top-down, one extreme, or bottom-up, other extreme, and in between there is a combination approach also. We'll discuss these. So participation in the budgeting process could be total involvement by the senior management, or a very limited involvement by the senior management, or it could be a combination of these two. We'll discuss these. But who are the parties who must have some role to play in the budgeting process? The board of directors that provide the strategic direction, the strategic oversight where they want to take the business to. Then further down the line, we have senior management responsible for taking the ship in the direction envisaged by the board of directors. Board of directors provide you the strategic direction where the business has to be taken. Who takes the business? Board of directors, they don't have operational role. They are just watchful eyes. Who does it? Senior management, CEO and his team. They are the one who are the actual players who will take the ship to the right direction, and the direction set by the board of directors. Right? So for this to make it work, we have a budget committee that is composed of top management and the departmental heads. The composition of this committee would vary from company to company. If it is the top-down approach, then the committee would comprise entirely of top management. If it's a bottom-up approach, then the committee would most probably be of the subordinate and lower-level management, or it could be a combination approach, as I said. So I'll explain. We'll move on to the next slide. this last line, middle and lower level management receive their budget instructions. This line. I told you there are two types of approaches, two extremes. One is the top-down approach, which is also the imposed approach. The top management sets the budget and simply throws it down this way. Okay, now this is the budget, achieve it. It has its own limitations, but sometimes it could be a good budgeting when the economic environment is stable, there is no volatility in the business in which you are operating, industry is stable. Top down is perfect. But it can fail when you are operating in a very dynamic environment where you need input from the subordinate management. For that we have another extreme approach called the bottom up or participative budgeting. Here the instructions come from top to bottom, but in the bottom up, senior management only provides you a guideline, and the lower level management, the middle or lower level management, they are the ones who create budgets. See, top down, senior management entirely. Bottom up, involvement of subordinate, middle and lower level management. In between this, there is an approach called the combination approach that has features of both top down and bottom up. So the last line here said, middle and lower level management receive their budget instructions. See, that is possible in the top down, where the senior management draws up the budget and then the instructions are given to the subordinate management how they will achieve their budget. So we can't say which is better, which is not. It is entirely dependent upon the context. Bottom up approach is recommended when you are operating in a very dynamic environment and where you need to have input from your subordinate management. They are at the action place, so they can provide you better input. So in that case, bottom up is suitable. Top down in a stable economic environment, and combination approach which has some features of top down and bottom up together. So we have some advantages, disadvantages listed in the next slide. Top down approach, where the budget is dumped from the top, imposed from the top. There are some advantages. There is consistency, because senior management can see a holistic picture. They can make a budget that is consistent across all the organizational functional units. It takes less time, it is less complex, and budget is prepared very quickly. That's the benefit. What are the drawbacks? The budget is viewed as imposed, forced, and hence less likely to promote sense of commitment. Employees will be demotivated, Vikas, that's exactly what you said, and hence they will have less ownership of the budget. They will not be committed with the budget. What about the opposing view, bottom-up budgeting? It has certain advantages and disadvantages also. Under bottom-up budgeting, since you are the one who set up the budget, so you will have sense of ownership as a middle-level employee, middle-level management or lower-level management. Right? It enables employees to relate performance to rewards or penalties. They are themselves who are setting the target for themselves. So be prepared. If you are not able to achieve the goals, it might result in penalties. Else you can also see the rewards coming if you achieve your targets. Since those who are at the action place, departmental heads who are actually working in respective roles, they are the one who can provide you better information for budgeting. Because senior management might be sitting in the box. They do not know the ground reality. These are the people at the bottom. They know how things are going on. So they provide broader information base. Hence they make the budget that is more realistic. There are disadvantages also. It will take more time. It will be costly. And there would be what you call the budgetary slack. We'll discuss this. Budgetary slack is the deliberate overestimation of expenses. Mind the word. Deliberate, intentional overestimation of expenses and underestimation of revenue. You deliberately, $100,000 should be sufficient as an expense, but you will overstate it. You will put a figure of $150,000. So you overstate your expenses and you understate the targeted revenue so as to make your targets easily attainable. So budgetary slack, sometimes called the budgetary padding. Sometimes called budgetary padding is deliberate overestimation of expenses. You show more than what the right amount of expense should be, and underestimation of revenue. Like Vikas, you are the sales manager and you know because you are the industry expert that the coming quarter sale will be $10 million. But you will agree to a sales target of $8 million so as to make your target easily attainable. See? So the budget slack can come from the sales side, underestimation of revenue, and it can come from the expense side, that is the overestimation of expense. So this is something that we should try to keep in check. We shouldn't allow the budgetary slack to creep into our budgeting system. Next, the use of cost standards. What are standards? Every couple of years, senior management, the production staff, the quality controllers, the industrial engineers, they sit together, they study their production system, and they set up the standard costs. How much material should be used, and what should be the rate? How much labor should be used, in which quantity, and what should be the labor rate we pay to our workers? Variable overheads, fixed overheads. In other words, we study the complete production system and set standards of cost of our material, quantity and rate, labor, variable overhead and fixed overhead. Standards provide you the foundation to build budgets. So what are standards? Basically, based upon our detailed studies of management accountants, production staff, quality controllers, those who are involved in production system. They study the overall production system and then they set standards. And what are standards? These are predetermined expectations of cost. What the cost is likely to be for material, labor, overhead and so on. How many units we will produce. What is the productive capacity of our plant. How many units can we produce if we keep on running our plant non-stop for 24 hours. So this is what we have studied already, theoretical versus practical standards. If our machine works non-stop for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, this is what we can do. But that is impractical. Sometimes we have to stop your machinery for preventive maintenance. Sometimes there is downtime because of lack of availability of material and so on. So practically, let's say we can produce 80,000. So you may take theoretical standard as your basis of standard costing, which is very unrealistic sometimes, very hard to sustain even for a couple of months. And maybe you can base your standards based on practical levels, what you can achieve practically given the constraints we might be putting. So your budgets or the standards, they could be loose standards or could be tight, but they should be reasonably strong so as to motivate the employees. They shouldn't be too lax, too loose, they shouldn't be too tight. So somewhere in between. So if one extreme we have the theoretical standards, too stiff, on the other we have normal standard which could be too loose, we might find somewhere the practical standard, like we can produce 100,000 in 100% ideal conditions. We can produce 60, that is what the history tells us. So let's go between something, between these two extremes. See, midway is always good. So let's say take 80 to be what we can practically do that, right? So that's the idea, theoretical, practical versus normal standards. So how do we develop standards? We'll discuss this in our section C, but let's have a quick overview. As I said, that standards are set for direct materials, rate and quantity, labor, rate and wage rate and quantity of hours, manufacturing overhead, variable and fixed, and we study them in detail. Based upon this, we set standards. Now, if your organization is resourceful, you can spend some good deal of resources, then you might go for a detailed activity analysis in which we identify each and every activity. It identifies, describes and evaluates the activities that go into producing a particular unit. That's a great deal of effort. That's where you require teams of your different production staff, sales, marketing, quality controllers, and then that ends up into the standard cost. Unfortunately, this is time consuming, takes too much of cost. We have an alternative. We can use our historical data, that what historically have we used as our direct labor hours. What historically have we been paying as our direct labor rate per hour? How much quantity of material we have been using in our production, and what has been the rate. So we can use our historical data. Go for detailed activity analysis when you are resourceful. Companies have money and we can go for a detailed evaluation, detailed description, identification of activities. But in case of unavailability of competent staff, time and resources, we can simply use our historical production data, and we can use it as our basis to set the standards. So whichever activity based or simply the historical data, your standards will form the foundation of your budgeting. We will discuss standard costing in much more detail in your section C. Right now we just need to know that the standards are the foundation on which we set up our budget. So once we set up the budget, give it to the management for approval, management might require some changes, might approve some changes. So that means we may have to revise the budget. Once the budget is revised, again submitted to the management, again some adjustments are made. So there are multiple iterations, and then finally once the budget is approved by the management, then it is applied for the different departmental units. So there are iterations. You make a budget, submit it to the management, you may need to adjust, again give it to the management, and then after a couple of cycles, budget will be finalized and approved. And as I said that as a management accountant, we should be able to identify the budgetary slack, deliberate overestimation of expenses, underestimation of revenues, and that can damage your entire budgeting process. It will reduce the effectiveness of your budgeting process. So budgetary slack must be identified and must be eliminated wherever practical. So that completes your 13.1 and 2. Overview has been done. Let's test our understanding through some good quality questions. Each organization plans and budgets its operations for slightly different reasons. Every business has a reason to make budget. Which of the following is not a significant reason for planning? Planning provides a basis for controlling operation. This is one of the reasons why we plan, why we prepare budgets. It helps you control. It forces managers to consider expected future trends and conditions. That is true also. Budgeting, planning will help or will force managers to consider expected future trends and conditions. That is true. Budgeting checks progress towards the objective of the organization. If you are achieving your budgets, it means you are on the right track. But budgets cannot guarantee profitable operations. Budgets cannot guarantee profitable operations, and that is the reason. See that. Which of the following best describes the role of top management in the budgeting process? Role of top management. This is the question for you. A is incorrect. Should be involved only in the approval process. They are there just to sign off. For God's sake, this is not what they are there for. Senior management lacks the detailed knowledge of the daily operations and should limit their involvement. Since they don't know the operations, so they should be set aside. This is again a very wrong approach. They have the knowledge, but not as detailed, but they know how things are being done. This is wrong as well. Senior management needs to separate the budgeting process and the business planning process into two separate processes. Wrong. Budgeting and planning, they are together. They go side by side. You can't separate them. So D is incorrect. Then it has to be C. Top management needs to be involved. Yes. Including using the budget process to communicate goals. We discussed that. What the senior management wants, they can communicate through budget. Budget is a good communication tool also. What is a planning calendar? A planning calendar in the budgeting is the calendar period covered by the budget. That's your financial year, not the planning calendar. Wrong. Planning calendar is the schedule of activities for the development and adoption of budget that contains key dates when the information would be made available. So this is true. It's the schedule of activities with key dates for the development and adoption of the budget. Calendar period covered by the annual budget and the long range plan. Wrong. Planning calendar is the sales forecast by month in the annual budget period. Wrong. It's a schedule of activities with key dates mentioned for the development and adoption of the budget. B is the right option. Which of the following is not an advantage of participatory budgeting process? What is participatory budgeting process? In which the senior management only provides you the guideline. The subordinate management, they are the one who draw up the budget and forward it for the approval. So which is not an advantage? Let me clean up the space. Coordination between departments, it's an advantage. Bottom-up or participatory budgeting. Remember, bottom-up and participatory budgeting is the same. So there will be coordination between the departments in the participatory budgeting. That is correct. Communication between departments. That is correct also. It's an advantage. Goal congruence. Again, this is an advantage. All these are correct. But control of uncertainty. That is not true. Control of uncertainty is no budgeting, whether it is top-down or bottom-up or combination approach. No budgeting methodology can control uncertainty. This is beyond the control of any budgeting. So this is wrong. Hence, this is not an advantage. In fact, this statement is wrong. That's why it's our right answer. When developing a budget, we discussed that there are some external factors, some internal factors. When developing a budget, an external factor to consider in the planning process is an external factor that is outside the geographical boundary of the organization. A change to a decentralized management system, from centralized to decentralized system where the subordinate managers are given the power to take decisions. That is inside your business, that is internal, not external. The implementation of a new bonus scheme, internal. New product development, internal. The merger of two competitors. You have two competitors, A and B, they merge. Of course, they are outside your organization. If this happens, this is clearly an external event. It's an external event, external factor. So these are items. Next, an advantage of participative budgeting, which is also called the bottom-up approach, is that it minimizes the cost of developing budgets. Wrong, it is very costly. Participative budgeting is costly. It costs more. Wrong. Reduces the effect on budgetary process of employees' biases. Wrong. There is more effect of employees' biases. Sales will give their input, it will be biased. Production will give their input, it will be biased. Every department is giving their input, so it is going to be biased. So these are the drawbacks. A is the drawback of participative budgeting. B is C. Yields information known to management but not to employees. Wrong. It is totally opposite. It is the information that is known to employees but not to the senior management. That's why it's called bottom-up approach. It encourages acceptance of the budget by employees. This is the advantage. Since it's the budget that has been set by you, exactly answer. Most of the options today we had are D. Encourage acceptance by the employees. That is correct. Now this is a wonderful question here. Fantastic question. Have a quick read, then I will read with you guys. The following sequence, one important point here I would like to make. Whenever you see a jumbo question like this, a full-length question I call it, you should always read the requirement first. What exactly are we supposed to do? This outline of steps best describe which of the following approaches to budget development. Is it a bottom-up, top-down? It's a combination approach. What exactly it is? So let us see. Let us see whether it's a bottom-up or top-down approach. Let us clean up the space also, so we can do the jottings. The following sequence of steps is employed by a company to develop its annual profit plan, also called the master budget. Planning guidelines are disseminated to downwards by the top management after receiving input from all levels of management. See, input was received from all levels of management, means the lower level, and then the planning guidelines were delivered. So that appears to be a bottom-up approach, BU. Sales budget is prepared by individual sales units reflecting the sales targets of the various segments. This provides the basis for the production budgets and other related components by the various operating units. Communication is primarily lateral. Lateral means this way, department to department, with some upward communication possible. So it means more departmental interactivity, more coordination between production, sales, marketing. It appears to be a bottom-up in the second option as well. A profit plan is submitted to the top management for coordination and review. Top management recommendations and revisions are acted upon through an iterative process we just discussed a little while ago. A revised profit plan is resubmitted for the further review to top management. Management at the top reviews and approves, gives instructions, asks for budget revision through iteration, and again submitted to the top management. The third one is also pointing us towards the bottom-up approach. Let's see the last option. Top management grants final approval and distributes the formal plan downwards to the various operating units. There is absolutely no doubt. Tanveez, you are absolutely right. Wakas, you are right too. Answer, you are right too. It is the bottom-up approach. If you read carefully, read between the lines, you are surely going to get the right option. So that is B. Next, again a wonderful question, a full-length question. Which of the following activities should Amador implement in order to best remedy Thomas' concerns to eliminate the problem experienced by Amador and motivate personnel? So we don't get a clear picture from the requirement, so we have to read the entire question. Clean up the space. Alright. Marita Thomas, Amador's Corporation's Vice President of Planning, has seen and heard it all. She has seen it, she has heard it, and she is fed up. She has told the corporate controller that she is very upset with the degree of slack. Slack we just discussed a little while ago. Slack means the deliberate overestimation of expenses and underestimation of revenue, which is bad for the company. But not always. Slack is not always. We'll discuss that sometime later. So she has told the corporate controller that she is very upset with the degree of overestimation of expenses and underestimation of expenses done by the experienced manager. This is a word we normally use for ex-army men, experienced army men, veteran managers use when preparing their budget. She is upset that even the experienced managers, they incorporate slack into the budgeting, which is bad, because the senior managers are expected to be more rational and more fair. But they are the one who are putting overestimation of expenses and underestimation of revenue. Thomas has considered implementing some of the following activities during the budgeting process. She is concerned about two things. First, she is concerned about the budgetary slack. She doesn't want to be too stiff. She wants to motivate the personnel also. Two things simultaneously. I want to avoid slack in the budget. At the same time, I want to motivate my employees. Two things which are opposing, but I want to bring these two things together. How can I do this? Which of the following activities Amador implement in order to best remedy Thomas' concerns, help eliminate the problem experienced by Amador, and motivate personnel? This and this. I want these two objectives to be met through which of these actions? First, develop the budgets by top management and issue them to the lower level of operating units. That will resolve the problem of budgetary slack to some extent, but it will not motivate personnel because they were not involved in the budgeting process. So one of the elements is met, but not the motivation element. So this is, we need to select those measures that achieve 1 and 2 simultaneously. 2. Study the actual revenues and expenses of previous periods in detail. Yes. Study what happened previously. What was cost and revenue last year. This will help you identify slack, and this will involve the management also. So this will not affect motivation. At least there is no demotivation here, but here there is demotivation. So this is fine. 2 appears to be good. Alright. What about 3? Have budgets developed by operating units and accept them as submitted by the company-wide budget committee. Just ask your subordinate management, they will make the budget and simply approve it without questioning. So this will clearly motivate employees. First, this objective would be met, but they will surely be slack, because when the operating segments management, they are giving the input, they will definitely, most certainly, they will add budgetary slack. They will overestimate expenses, underestimate revenues. So this third point will not address the issue of budget slack. It will motivate, everyone will be happy, but this will not resolve the issue of budgetary slack. What about 4? Share the budgets with all employees as a means to reach the company goals and objectives. Yes, that will motivate. This is a good step. 4th appears to be a good one. Use an iterative budgeting process. You make the budget, submit, cancel, revision. Do again, submit, amendments. And this iteration, repetitive process, means the budget will refine through every iteration and finally we end up with a budget that is very relevant. So it makes sense. Use an iterative budgeting process that has several rounds of changes initiated by operating units or senior management. That makes perfect sense. 2, 4, and 5 makes perfect sense. D is the right answer. Answer, you got it right. Answer has recently passed his part 2 and he is surely in his element at the moment. Correct option, D, is the right option. When compared to the ideal standards, I told you there are 3 standards which we could possibly use. So when compared with the ideal standards, practical standards, we discussed that a little while ago. Practical standards, ideal standards, and normal standards. If we purchase a machine that works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we keep on running it round the clock, this is what we can produce. And after that, the machine will go bust after a few months. Normally, we produce 60,000 units every year, including some downtime, some shutdown because of maintenance. And practical standard is what we can produce practically given the limitations of downtime and labor strikes and all that. So this is more attainable. This is ideal, and this is, of course, it involves some slack. When compared with the ideal standards, practical standards produce lower per unit cost. No. Ideal practical standard, they will produce higher per unit cost. How? This is the idea. We have 3 standards: ideal standards, practical, and normal standard. Let's say our cost of production involves fixed cost, which is $100,000. $100,000. The rest of the 3 costs, direct material, direct labor, variable overheads, they will be same on per unit basis, whether you use the normal capacity or normal standard or practical standard or the ideal standard. Gentlemen, it's a very, very, very fine point. Please be with me. Your direct material, direct labor, variable overheads on per unit basis will be exactly the same whether you use the ideal standard, practical standard, normal standard, because they are truly variable costs. What will affect your unit cost is the fixed cost, because it doesn't change with the level of output or the standard you have selected. If you use the fixed cost, your fixed cost per unit on ideal standard will be $1. Then for practical standard, it is going to be 100,000 divided by 80,000. It is going to be $1.25. Just to make your first option clear, 100,000 divided by 60,000, it gives you 1.667. See? So these 3 components of the cost, they will be same, but your fixed cost per unit would be highest in case of normal standard and lowest in case of ideal standard. Now read the option A. When compared with the ideal standard, practical standards produce lower per unit cost, no, higher. Normal standard, they give you even higher unit cost. So this option A is incorrect. Just to make this point clear, I have to go for this extended explanation. Practical standards result in less desirable basis for the development of budget. Wrong. Practical standards are very suitable basis to set up your standard because they are what we can practically achieve. So this is not true as well. Practical standards incorporate very generous allowance for spoilage and work inefficiencies. This is true for normal standard because this is set at the lowest level. Not the practical is what we can practically achieve given the downtime and all that. So that is not true. Then 39D. Practical standards serve as a better motivating target for manufacturing personnel because this is what they can practically achieve. Ideal standard is hard to attain. Normal standard is very inefficient. So practical standard is the most suitable. It serves a better motivating tool because this is what we can attain. So that makes D to be the correct option. Just one last question just to make the point. It's a very valid question here. Please, just last question, then we wind up our class one. Granger Company is reviewing its standard machine hours per unit to use in its budget for the upcoming year. The machine manufacturer's specification indicated a unit could be made in 0.75 hours. Now, this is the ideal standard. Your manufacturer says that each unit can be produced at this level. This is the ideal standard. Next. And a benchmarking study showed a competitor produced at a speed of 0.78 machine per hour. This is another standard. We don't know what it's going to be. Let us put it there. Ranger's actual results from the last year was 0.83. Even though standard of 0.8 per hour had been established using engineering studies. Now this is an interesting question. We want to set a standard for our costing. This is the manufacturer's specification. If the machine is worked under ideal circumstances, this is what the time each unit would take. It's hour. Remember, the time is in hours. Right? Next is 0.78. This is the time taken by our leading competitor, 0.78. This was our time achieved last year, and as per our own studies conducted by our own staff, engineering studies, this is the time we will take given our peculiar circumstances. Now this is the ideal standard. This is the normal standard that we have achieved previously. This is the practical standard keeping in mind the engineering studies. Now if we have to set standards, the standard Granger should use in the upcoming period should be the one that is very relevant, neither too stiff in the ideal standard nor too soft like the normal standard. The perfect standard that you should go for is the one that is resulted from a detailed engineering studies given your unique circumstances of excellence. Very right. So because of our unique peculiar circumstances, this is the time that should go with us. So that makes C to be the correct option.